This episode of YXE Underground is supported by Rob Romvey and his team at Romvey Wealth Management Group of RBC Dominion Securities in North Battleford. If you need someone to care for and invest your money, there is no better group of people than Rob Romvey and his team.
As far as being a nurse, I think the thing that gets you through, the one thing that you really want to hold on to is if in that 12 hours you can get that one meaningful interaction where the patient is feeling understood and you're really able to get the connection. That's everything, and that makes it all worthwhile.
Hello, I'm Eric Anderson. The voice you just heard belongs to registered nurse Jamie Coates. Jamie, along with Jenna Isley and Lana Meyerly, are the featured guests in Season 4, Episode 7 of YXE Underground. Leadership, compassion, empathy. 3 of the many qualities that registered nurses in our city have in spades. Yet, these qualities have been severely tested in the past 2 years thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what has it been like to be a nurse during the pandemic? We find out from 3 nurses in this episode of YXE Underground. Two years ago, Saskatoon was preparing to host the Juno Awards. COVID-19 was definitely in the news, but it had not reached our community yet. All systems were ready to go to celebrate the best in Canadian music. For myself, I was excited to release a pair of YXE Underground episodes highlighting the behind-the-scenes work it took to bring the Juno Awards to Saskatoon and to host the JunoFest concert series. All of that changed when the first case of COVID-19 was confirmed in Saskatchewan. The Junos were cancelled, school was quickly moved to online learning at home, and my job as communications leader at Sherbrooke Community Centre, a long-term care home in Saskatoon, quickly focused on crisis communications. We are now 2 years into the pandemic, and I wanted to tell that story through the lens of registered nurses in this episode. Every day I see the incredible work performed by nurses, and I know the positive impact they are having on residents, patients, and families in our community and across the province. I also know this pandemic has been especially challenging for all healthcare workers, nurses included. What I really appreciate about the guests you are about to meet is how honest they are about the challenges they have faced throughout the past 2 years. Jenna Isley, Lana Meyerly, and Jamie Coates are the 3 nurses you will meet, and I think hearing their stories will give you a new appreciation for the work they do and the impact the pandemic has had on them. At 22 years of age, Jenna Isley is beginning her nursing career. In fact, she recently celebrated her first year of being a registered nurse. In the past 2 years, Jenna has gone from third-year nursing student at the University of Saskatchewan to continuing care aide at Sherbrooke Community Centre to now being an RN in maternal services at the Jim Pattison Children's Hospital. There are a few things that struck me when I spoke with Jenna. The first is her story of where she was when news came out about the first case of COVID-19 in Saskatchewan. It's a crazy story that you'll hear in just a few seconds. The second is how mature Jenna is. There are a couple of moments in our conversation where in my mind I'm thinking, wow, if only I had been this mature and had my life in order like this when I was 22. It really was a pleasure speaking with Jenna. I've been able to get to know her a little bit through her work at Sherbrooke and through her mom, Colleen, who is a wonderful colleague of mine, but it was really great learning more about her. We met at the Yard and Flagon pub on a Friday afternoon. Jenna had just finished a shift at the hospital, and I started our conversation by asking how she would describe the last 2 years.
It's been wild. The last year has definitely been crazy. Like I said, I've been nursing for a year now. So obviously started that right in the middle of the pandemic. And yeah, it's been a big learning curve, I guess, like starting a brand new career. And then things are changing every day with COVID. And I guess just kind of keeping up with that, those changes. It's been crazy. It's been a big learning curve for sure. Yeah.
I think to start any job in the midst of this pandemic would be interesting, challenging perhaps, but to start your nursing career in the midst of a pandemic, like what was that like? Like, do you remember what you were doing a couple years ago when all this started to happen?
I do actually. I was in third year, and I remember I was just starting my clinical on the pediatric ward. And then, of course, things got really crazy really fast. It just happened all of a sudden. And I remember like being really scared about it. We didn't stay on peds very long. I guess we kind of switched to being online right away. I think it was the first day that we had a case of COVID in the province was actually the day we were on the peds floor. And it was just like a really uneasy feeling. I think everyone was like it was just really stressful. And I remember just being paranoid, probably the same way that everybody else felt. Like you have a sore throat and you're like, oh my gosh, like what if I have COVID? But I remembered being so scared because I was working at Sherbrooke at the time as a care aide, so lots of like elderly people, and then working with kids on peds. And I remember like one day, having a tickle in my throat, and I was terrified. Like I was so scared. What if I like had brought that to peds, or it was, like it was just a really uneasy couple weeks. It was weird, yeah.
So that day that the first case happens and you're on peds, like were your instructors saying anything to you, or like were fellow nurses, or like what was anything said to you as a third year nursing student?
Yeah, so we had gotten there in the morning. We would always like meet up as a group, have a little like huddle before our shift with our instructor. And I just remember our instructor like shutting the door, and she was like, okay, she's like, today you guys are just an extra set of hands. She's like, you're gonna feel the chaos of the unit today, and you're just gonna go help out. And so that's exactly what we did. Typically you'd be like assigned a patient, and kind of like working along with that nurse, and then they're like teaching you a lot kind of along the way and like kind of guiding you. But there just like wasn't time for that. It was kind of just like full on, like we just gotta get to it. So yeah, I just remember that day. It was like everybody was so stressed out. I remember the nurses were just like doing their best to manage with kind of like what they knew and things like that. So
did you what did you take away from that day? Like when the day was done, like what did you learn from that day?
I guess I learned how much preparation it usually takes, and just like how much, not necessarily a pandemic, because obviously this is the first time I've seen that, but just like how much preparation kind of goes into like making changes, because like things were changing that day and you kind of had to just like learn it and figure it out and go from there. I remember them talking about like the swabs and like if we were going to have enough swabs. And it was like RSV season is what it's called, and so really common virus. A lot of the kiddos that are on peds, kind of in those winter months, typically have RSV. So they're coming in with a sore throat or with a cough or like difficulty breathing, which are all COVID symptoms. So I remember that was a lot of the talk, was like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna manage like testing everybody, waiting for test results, and yeah, a lot of preparation.
I feel overwhelmed hearing that story for you. Like, were you and your classmates just like, oh my gosh, what are we getting ourselves into? Or do you even have time to think about it and it's like, we got to do our job?
Yeah, I guess a little bit of both. I remember my instructor was like so supportive during like the day, but then also following that. I think that was like the last day we were actually in person, and then they decided to move us all online. So yeah, it was definitely stressful. I feel like that day, it was just kind of like a go, go, go. You don't really have time to like necessarily think about it. But I just remember feeling really supported, especially from her. And like she'd be sending us texts just to kind of check in. Just knowing that like everybody was stressed out, whether you're in the hospital or not, it was just like a weird time. So that was really awesome. Yeah.
So you keep doing your courses, but everything switched to online. What was that like for you?
It was a little bit weird for sure. We typically have like sim labs, so we'll go in, you'll have like basically a fake patient with a made-up scenario, and it's always like super good learning. It's just like a safe environment, I guess, to kind of make those mistakes and stuff. And we were doing sim labs online, which was obviously super different from the real deal. But they did continue on like with our classes and stuff, which was nice. But it was weird. Like I even remember at the very beginning, we were on Zoom and like everyone's trying to figure out how to use Zoom, and yeah, it was just such a bizarre thing like to think about it now, because 2 years later it's like everyone knows how to work Zoom, but back then it was like nobody knew and nobody could get on, and you know, it was crazy.
Were you able to do still some practical work beyond like all the Zooms? Like, were you able to go into places and still do some practical work, or was it strictly online for you, Jenna?
Yeah, so it ended up being online for like the rest of that semester. And then it was that kind of time that I decided to fast track. So I ended up finishing my degree in the 3.5 years. And in like my kind of thought process to that was like, I'm going to be going over the summer, but we're in a pandemic, so I'm not going to, really miss out on anything. And so I did a couple classes online, and then I actually ended up getting to go back into person that next September. We did our community placement, and so we got to, actually be there in person, which was good. And then I ended off with my preceptorship, and that was all in person too. I got to be in the hospital for that, so yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have been, we were talking before we started recording, like it's basically been a year since you have been like officially a registered nurse. This is a really big question, but what has the last year been like as an official RN?
Oh, it's been great actually. I feel like I've learned a lot. And I feel like as new nurses during this pandemic, we don't always like give ourselves enough credit for like you said, you're starting this brand new job, but then you're also like in the middle of this pandemic. And so I think it's been, like a lot of learning, and just like being able to kind of adapt.
When you say adapt, what do you mean by that?
Well, like policies and things like that are changing every day, and like even visitor kind of policies, and then also bouncing between Sherbrooke, which is like long-term care, and then being in the hospital, picking up at Sherbrooke, and things change like from every time I go, it's like there's new rules and new policies and new everything. But I guess it's been like communicated with us really well and stuff, but I think it's just been wild just starting during all of this.
May I say it's so well, I didn't know what you were going to say in terms of what the last year was, but the fact that like it's, you obviously like you're feeling good about it, like I know it, like it's got to be like lots of challenges, but it's nice to hear that, like, because I know you're such a good nurse, and so it's nice to hear that you have that enthusiasm. Yeah,
I think like coming on, and even like when I started my career, a year ago, staff were already kind of burnt out, and a year later, like it hasn't really gotten a lot better, and I think that that's just something that's gonna hopefully get better with time. But I think it's kind of nice being fresh into this. Obviously I'm feeling a little bit of that like fatigue and stuff. But you just really see it, I guess, and I guess you just remember like everybody is kind of going through the same thing, and if somebody seems like they're having a bad day, it's like honestly they're probably just like so sick of all of this, and like you gotta just kind of give that to them. So
do you feel as though as a young nurse with lots of energy and enthusiasm, can you sort of spread that wherever you are working, whether it is at Sherbrooke or whether it's at the hospital? Do you feel like you're able to do that a little bit?
Like I try to. I'd like to think so, but I'm not so sure. I think the biggest thing is like just like offering help, like if you've got some downtime, like especially in the hospital when you're working beside nurses, and I guess COVID or not, like whether it has anything to do with that, it's like just like offering a little bit of help if they need it, if you're kind of having a less busy day. I think that like really goes a long way, maybe more so than like the energy, but I hope so. Who knows?
What have been some of the bigger challenges that you've encountered in the last year? And like you said, like nursing is a challenging job at the best of times, let alone in a pandemic. But what have been some of the challenges for you?
Well, I think like kind of speaking about the NICU more so, actually, and even Sherbrooke, it's been really hard like to support families and even residents. Not so much to support them, but just to like have to be the person that says to them like, I'm sorry, you can only have your one visitor and things like that. Like we were lucky in the NICU, there wasn't a lot of COVID or anything like that. Just because they do such a good job, it's like such an at-risk population. So they do a really, really good job at preventing that. But of course, you still have to kind of deal with it. But it was really hard because pre-pandemic in the NICU, from my understanding, they could have unlimited visitors. There were kind of restrictions on age, like children, weren't necessarily allowed to come, but you could only have 2 at a time. But that meant that like mom and dad could come visit, and then mom and grandma could be visiting, and then dad and his brother or whatever. And like I can only imagine how much of a difference that made for people. So it was really hard, like, having to tell families, like, sorry, grandma can't come visit or whatever. Especially when they're there for, like, months at a time, some of them, right? And even only for days at a time, it's still so hard.
What are those conversations like?
Usually they're really understanding of it when you kind of explain the reasoning for it, and obviously like patient safety is the most important thing, but I think that there's always a lot of disappointment, and like depending on the circumstance, I mean sometimes they do end up being allowed another visitor or whatever, just depending. It's very like based on their situation, has to get approved by management. But sometimes there were situations that didn't necessarily like meet those, qualifications, let's say. But you could still like, you feel for them and you're like, I know this sucks. Like, but I think that when you actually explain to them like the reasoning for it, they definitely were understanding of it. Yeah.
There's so much empathy in your job, isn't there? Especially when it comes to communication.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even being at Sherbrooke, like I was working as a care aide when COVID happened and picking up a little bit and stuff too. And even that was so hard. Like I remember the residents, being really bummed that, you can't go see anybody, you can't go do anything. And I just even remember like when they started to do like the fence visits, like just the change in energy, people were like able to see family, even if it's through a fence. So you definitely see like how much it affects other people. And like I know for me, like I live at home still, so it's like at least I'm lucky enough to like go home and I get to see people, I get to see my family. But when you're living at Sherbrooke or you're in the hospital, it's like you don't necessarily get that. So I definitely feel for them.
I'm curious, when you have days where you have to have like those difficult conversations, are you able to leave work at work, or does it, when you leave for the day, does it linger?
I feel like it lingers a little bit, and I think that that's something like, I think as nurses we're kind of encouraged to like leave work at work, but I also feel like it's, when you're in a profession where you're so caring and you're so like compassionate, I think that's hard to do. I remember like when restrictions had sort of changed and kind of the public was able to, go out and do things and go for supper and things like that. And just because of like, the SHA restrictions, like residents at Sherbrooke weren't necessarily able to leave yet. Like I remember really struggling with that, and not because of the rules, because obviously it's to keep them safe, like that's so important. But like then I never wanted to go do anything, right? Because I'm like, well, I want to make sure that they're safe. And like I think everybody in my house was really careful about that, because you're always thinking about work and you want to protect them and things like that. So it's definitely hard to totally leave it at work, but I do my best as much as I can.
As a young nurse, like do you work in a type of environment, Jenna, where like you can talk about this kind of stuff like with fellow nurses and bounce ideas off of them, or just let them know how you're feeling? Or is it more, do you just, wait till home and then talk about with your family or perhaps friends? Like what is that like for you?
Honestly, I think I don't talk about it as much as I could at work. I think like with my mom and like her job and stuff, she kind of gets where I'm coming from, and so she's been like a really good support, I guess. Yeah, and I guess, I don't know, it's a conversation that I just don't tend to have at work. Even though I'm sure other people are kind of feeling the same way, I feel like when you're at work, you want to just like put on your game face and just like, kind of get into your job, and obviously you're still being really compassionate, but it's like, it's almost hard to like admit that it's like, yeah, I do kind of take that home with me a little bit, I struggle with it, right? Like you almost don't want to admit it in a way.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know, honestly. Now that I think about it, like, I don't know.
So right as soon as you mentioned that, I was thinking of my mom, because my mom was a nurse for 27 years, and my mom was very much like where she worked in a long-term care home. I always viewed her as like a leader, and she was a very strong nurse and could absorb lots of things, kind of deal. And I wonder if there's that perception of like, okay, I'm the nurse, I've got to keep everything sort of together and make sure everyone, not only patients or residents, but other staff as well. Maybe, I don't know. I'm spitballing.
Yeah, it's like that actually makes sense. It's like you want to just like stay strong for everybody. Yeah, that does actually make a lot of sense. I think even it's like with deaths. Like you obviously see a lot of that in long-term care, and I think sometimes like, and I mean even working as a care aide, like you get to know those residents, and like it'll happen on shift or whatever, and you kind of just like stay strong at work, but then you go home and you're sad about it, and you kind of like are grieving a little bit, but it's like when you're at work, you kind of you do just want to stay strong and just kind of get through the day.
That's really interesting too, because especially where at a place like Sherbrooke, where relationships are so encouraged between care staff, nurses, and residents, when there is a death, then it hits you.
Yeah, and I think Sherbrooke is really good for that because it is their home, and it is obviously long term, and so you get to know those residents so well, and so you really do get to know them, and it's never easy. I guess like even in the hospital, it's not easy at all, but it's such a different like relationship that you have with them sometimes. Maybe not all the time, but just like speaking from my experience, definitely have dealt with it a lot more at Sherbrooke. But it's like those long-term relationships, and you really like get to know them, and they get to know you. So
you just said a word, experience, that makes me think you've had so many experiences in this last like year or 2 years. Like talk about an education that you've received. You must have learned so much.
Yeah, I honestly have. I feel like, well, when I was in the NICU and was picking up at Sherbrooke, it was like literally I'm dealing with like premature babies all the way up to like end of life, like your last few years. Not necessarily all of that being at Sherbrooke, but of course some of it is. But I guess that's kind of the nice thing about nursing, is you can kind of bounce around and you can be in more than one place at once, right? Like picking up, wherever you kind of want to, while kind of keeping your job where you have like those full-time hours or those part-time hours. So it's definitely the beauty of it, is there's so many different areas and so much to learn always.
Have you stayed in touch with your classmates who you've graduated with, and like how they're doing?
Yeah, I actually have. There was a pretty big group of us girls, and of course we don't see each other as often anymore, but it's nice like just having that support system, because they all get it. They're all going through the same thing, wherever you're working right now, whatever area you're in, it's like you get it, whether it's like COVID kind of related stress or just like being a brand new nurse. Like it's intimidating, and it's like some days are really hard, and so it is really nice to just kind of have that support system, even if it's like a text to the group chat with everybody. Like we don't necessarily see each other all the time, but I am very thankful for them.
This might be a hard question to answer, but I'm curious, because I remember when the pandemic started 2 years ago, and there was so much support for healthcare workers, and I remember, people banning pots of pans at, certain times of day in certain neighborhoods or whatever. And I feel like as we've gone on, there's been, I don't know if a shift is the right word, but things have just changed. I think it's obviously wearing on so many people, and then, like, do you feel appreciated, Jenna, for what you do?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah, I guess just like with everything that's going on, it's so hard sometimes because it's like you're just going to work and doing your job, right? And I know, like, even, talking about COVID, you hear a lot of people say, like, well, you signed up for this. It's like, hey, I did not know, right, fresh out of grade 12, that I was going to be starting my career during a pandemic. And of course, like, I am still so glad that that's what I ended up doing. But I think that there's, maybe a little bit less appreciation. Not necessarily, like, all the time, though. But, I definitely, like, I get that vibe sometimes. Yeah.
You mentioned, though, like, at any time did you feel like, what have I got myself into, sort of deal?
No. I think some days are definitely harder than others. But I think it's kind of like what I was meant to do. I mean, obviously this has added like an extra challenge, but I am still so grateful for it, and I think it's so nice, like, even talking about, the struggles that I had in the NICU, just like with families and having to tell them that, and even at Sherbrooke, like, they're all sad and they want to go see their families. It's almost like a privilege to be able to, like, then be that person for them. Like in the NICU, it's like, well, now it's just, mom and her support person, whether that's dad, whether that's grandma, sister, whatever. But it's like, I feel like they maybe are, like, leaning on you a little bit more. And same with at Sherbrooke. Like, I remember really feeling like I had to, like, really step up, more so when I was working as a carried, just because you're with those residents, like, so often. And you really, like, I remember just, like, really putting in an extra effort, because I was like, they're all so, like, sad. Like, energies were just so low because it's like, they're sad. So I think part of it is, like, I'm almost just, like, grateful for it, which is weird, but I think it's like, it is like a privilege for sure.
When did you know that you wanted to be a nurse?
Oh gosh. It was a little bit last minute, to be honest. I wanted to be a teacher for, like, my whole life. And then I was in...
Because your aunt is a teacher, right?
She is actually, like, and her husband is a teacher. And a lot of, like, my great aunties and things like that. And some, like, second cousins and whatever, they're teachers. But it was super last minute. It was family friends of ours. Their daughter had just finished nursing school, and they were asking me what I wanted to go into. And I said, like, education. And they were, like, really encouraging me to go into nursing. And I hated blood. Like, literally, you would say the word and I would, like, feel like I was ready to faint. And I remember sitting there and I was laughing and my parents were laughing, and I was like, I could not be a nurse. Like, I literally cannot do the blood. There's no way I could handle it. And they were like, no, like, this is how she was when she was, like, your age, and then now she's a nurse, she loves it, like, you should really do it. And I remember that night opening up my computer, looking at the nursing programs, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do it. Like, I'm gonna go for it. And now I'm so glad I did. Like, it's so weird. I feel like people have, especially nurses, like girls that I went to school with, there's always, like, a nice story. It's like, oh, my grandma was a nurse and my mom was a nurse, and I knew from when I was, like, 3 years old, but it was so last minute for me, and it just, like, fell into place. Like, it just worked out. Wow. So I know, it's wild.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I was kind of expecting the whole, like, ever since grade 4 or 5, I knew I was going to help others and be a nurse.
No.
You have been very generous with your time, and you're so well spoken. And thank you. When you were just going through that story, though, it got me thinking about, obviously those friends of yours saw something in you that were like, well, Jenna would make a good nurse. And maybe we can end this way. Like, are there certain qualities that you see in other nurses where it's like, like that makes them a good nurse? Like, what are the qualities that make a good nurse in your mind?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you got to be pretty compassionate, which is like such an obvious one, but honestly, it goes such a long way. Um, and like your patient really notices, and the families notice, like they really do. Um, and I think having patience, of course, but that is a really big one. Um, and I think too, just like being flexible. Um, Not even with COVID, but just like every day you're gonna get something thrown at you. You don't know what to expect. You kind of just have to like adapt and be able to kind of navigate through that. Yeah.
That's a really nice answer. Jenna, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really cool to see you go from like care aide to like full on nurse, and then occasionally when you come back into Sherbrooke, it's always nice to see you. But yeah, you're doing amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to Season 4, Episode 7 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and we are speaking with 3 Saskatoon nurses to discover what the past 2 years have been like working in a pandemic. Follow and listen to YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the website, yxeunderground.com, or wherever you find your podcasts. You can also find YXE Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and don't forget to leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. Lana Meyerly has an incredible gift of instantly putting people at ease. I think this is because of her caring nature and her ability to listen. For the past 22 years, Lana has worked as a registered nurse at Sherbrooke Community Centre, specifically in Veterans Village, which is home to 40 residents, many of which are veterans. She is a strong and compassionate leader who admits the last 2 years have been the most challenging of her career. Yet, she is hopeful for the next generation of nurses, a generation that includes her 2 daughters. Lana was kind enough to meet me in Veterans Village on her day off, and I started by asking how she would describe working during this pandemic.
I think probably the first word that comes to mind is challenging for sure. It's been kind of a roller coaster of emotions, lots of mixed emotions. I guess honestly in the beginning, we didn't really know how things were going to look. We didn't know how long this would last. Staff kept coming to me and saying, if I bring this virus in here, I don't know what I'll do. And there was just a whole sense of people being scared and anxiety, just even with the unknown. And as time went on, I guess I just felt the grief and sadness for lots of the residents. You could see how lonely they were. The elders would talk to me about like their families and just how much they missed them and how they wanted to see their kids and their grandkids. And I actually, during that time, I actually wrote down some of the things that they said to me so that I would never forget. They said things like, I've been through the worst of the war, but this is awful. People are dying and I'm lonely. And another elder said, they want to save us. Save us for what? This is terrible. Another one said, I just want to live at risk. If I'm 96 years old, I may only have a couple of years left, and I don't want to be locked up. And watching some of these same elders pass away during this time was really devastating. But then on the upswing came, the joy and the hope of the vaccine. And I totally remember that day clearly. I was working and we had been planning for that day and getting everything organized. And all of a sudden it was like the end of the day, and I remember it was coming, and a bunch of us stayed late actually so that everyone could have the vaccine. And it was just, it just felt like hopefulness all throughout the building.
Thank you for such a thoughtful answer. There's a lot to unpack there. I do want to. Do you mind if I go back to when when the pandemic first started for you, do you remember what those first couple of days were like for you as a nurse here in a long-term care home?
I just remember I actually was off on that Saturday and Sunday. It was my weekend off. And I knew the world was it felt like the world was coming to an end. Everything was closing. And so I came back Monday. And, over the weekend, things had really changed. And every area went into a strict lockdown. And residents were, we have individual housing units here, and they had to all stay in their own houses. Instantly, we were masking, and we were doing temperatures, and just a lot more screening. Families could no longer come in, and so we were phoning families, and just I know. Other people were emailing families, contacting them, telling them about all the changes. And so it kind of felt like everything was happening like in a fury,
What were those conversations like with families when this all first started?
I think they didn't know what was to be expected either. And I just think that for the most part, honestly, families were just so great. Lots of people were scared, and they just wanted their loved one to be safe. So, it was good. I think throughout this whole time, actually, families have been really, really supportive.
As a nurse, what were some of the things that were going through your mind when this was starting? Like you mentioned some of the tasks that you had to do in terms of there was temperatures and there's masking and there's communication with families, and I'm sure residents had lots of questions. But as a nurse, were there certain things that were going through your mind, like, okay, we should start thinking about this or that, or things we had to do?
Yeah, I just think that I kind of thought, how are we going to do this all? Because our days actually felt busy prior to this. And, even just like the area I work, there's 40 residents. So I thought even just taking everybody's temperature, 40 different temperatures, and how are we going to how long is that going to take? But actually, with everything comes positive, and that was good in the sense that every day then I laid eyes on every resident, had some conversation with residents. And so something that was sort of seemed like now a task that, oh great, how are we going to do all this? It just meant more contact with them. And then I thought, we have eyes on them, we can be more vigilant if things pop up. It actually is probably really good. Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but did anything in your nursing career sort of prepare you for what these last couple years have been like, or is this something that's just like entirely new and you're sort of learning on the fly as an experienced nurse?
Oh, for sure. And I mean, as we all know, all the guidelines and restrictions and regulations, it was changing weekly, sometimes daily, and just to even keep up with that. And I think just all the emotions that go into your job to begin with. But then it's all, I think always, people like some sense of control and knowing what lies ahead. And even that part where you don't even know what this is going to look like. We've never walked through this before in our generation. So I just kind of thought yeah, it is hard for sure. I don't think, even as nobody could have prepared for this, right? Or what it would look or feel like. Yeah.
Were you must have been receiving lots of questions in those first few weeks and first few months from residents and even care staff and families. Do you remember what some of those questions were like? And were you able to give all the answers that you could?
Oh, a lot was, when can we come again? I feel like a lot of the families, just wanted to see their loved ones, and rightly so. And I feel like we didn't know. We didn't know when that would open up enough so that they could come, you know. So we would say, you know, lots of times we'd say, you know, you probably know as much as we do. Like, we're listening to the government and to the SHA, and we're just, you know, as soon as we know anything, we'll contact you, we'll let you know. But, you know, during that time, like, we were able to always, I think, try to offer, like, other, like, FaceTime, for instance. The recreation staff was, like, amazing. And so, you know, we would, if they had a question, you know, about visiting, we'd say, you know, we don't know, we can't do that right now, but this is something we've come up with that maybe you'd be interested in. We can set this up for you, or, you know, so those type of things for sure. And there were lots of questions that I did not know the answer to, and I would just say, you know, that's a great question. Like, I'll just have to get back to you tomorrow. I'll find out. Yeah.
Is it, because would it be fair to say, Lana, that you and nurses in a long-term care setting, that you would be leaders, and seen as leaders, like, you know, in Veterans Village or in a different, you know, a different neighborhood or a different floor? Would it be fair to say that you would be a leader here?
Oh, I think for sure.
Yeah.
You know, when, especially sometimes, like, you know, managers are here from the Monday to Friday, and so we're here in the evening, we're here on weekends sometimes. For sure, the staff call on you. We're always available. We carry cell phones. So I feel like often, you know, we just get calls and people asking us questions or bouncing ideas off us, or come see this. Can you come check at this? Oh, you know, so for sure. Yeah.
So then, as a leader, you know, and you're receiving all these types of questions, and there's so much uncertainty. How do you? Because one of the things I admire so much about you is that you have such a calming presence amongst people, I think, anyways. But, like, how does a leader remain calm when there's just, like, so much uncertainty, and especially in those first few months when no one really knew what was going on?
Yeah, you know, I think that's funny you say that. Lots of people say that, and I think, Jim, I really like boring and monotone. But no, I think, you know, we can do what we can do. And so, I mean, when staff were coming to me and saying, I'm completely stressed out, I don't know what I would do if I brought the virus in here, I would listen to them. I think lots of times I'm just like a sounding board, and then afterwards just encourage them and just say, you know, we're all trying our very best, and so we'll do what we do, we'll try our best, and if it comes, it comes, and we'll take it one day at a time, you know.
I like that advice. That's very good. When there was word that the vaccine was coming, like you mentioned that in terms of, like, one of the things that brought you joy, and, like, you remember that day. I remember that day here too, and there was such a buzz in the building. Like, what was that like to know that you were part of the, like, part of the solution, like part of the, you know, this is going to help residents to stay healthy and help us get back to, you know, some sort of normal anyways. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was so great. Like, it was just, it gave some hope, right? After almost a year, like, you know, 10 months or whatever, and then the vaccine was available to them, you know, it just took a piece of that worry away, I would say, right? For the families to know, and just to feel some sort of assurance that we actually did something. Because lots of times you feel like you want to help, and, like, I think as a nurse we want to, you know, we want to care for people, we want to heal people, and yet in this you felt so helpless, and you just felt like this was part of that solution, and that would offer hope, and that we could give some sort of protection to these residents. And just then that in turn was just a huge comfort to the families. And so, no, for sure, it just felt like, yes, something. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's such an interesting perspective in terms of, like, as a nurse, you're there to help. And then in something like this, like there's for the longest time there was so much you couldn't do. Did that make you feel helpless?
Yeah, I think during this time that, we all get good at caring for people's physical needs. And, we learn all those tasks in nursing school. And as you go along in your career, you get better and better at the task. But to actually care for their, emotional and mental needs, those, because they were lonely and struggling, I think that was even harder some days, caring for and helping them with those things than their physical needs. And honestly, so just to be able to give them some hope and say that this is helping to protect you, and this will help hopefully open things up and just give some light and positivity to the situation.
When you did have residents that would talk to you and maybe they would be down or they're having a tough day or say to you, I miss my family and when is this going to end? How do you as a nurse go about meeting those emotional needs and helping out? Like I guess it would be mental health, wouldn't it? Like how do you go about doing that as a nurse?
Yeah, I think it all starts right like at the beginning of each day. It's just your attitude too. And I always think, that's the one thing I miss about so much is with the masks is just smiles, right? That connection. And so I would often just say, good morning. I'm smiling at you behind behind this mask. And they know by your squinty eyes now, right? They can tell. But I think, you could tell when you walk into certain rooms if they're feeling down, and you just knew you had to spend a little extra time in there. And also say, maybe we should call your son or daughter later. And so often, I feel like lots of phone calls, lots of FaceTimes. I would talk to recreation and say, just maybe could we set up a FaceTime? Those sorts of things. So I honestly think it was a big team approach for sure.
I was just about to say it does take a village, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like everybody, I'm so proud of everybody like that has come together during this time and just to get really creative and come up with different solutions, and it feels like we've come such a long way, but who knows how long to go.
May I ask you a personal question?
Yeah.
So on those days where you are speaking with residents and maybe you have a couple residents, maybe there's 4 or 5 that say to you, I'm having a tough day. How do you deal with that, Lana? And do you do you take that home with you, or how do you cope with all that? Because it must be. Is it draining at times?
Oh, for sure. I think for everyone, right, at some level, this pandemic going on and on and on has been draining for sure. I think, I think it's a lot of your mindset though, and I honestly do feel like I try. It's hard not to. There were days I went home and I said to my husband, I'm just so sad for these people. I'm just so sad. And you can't shut that off, But I honestly, lots of days I would pray coming to work. Like I live 5 minutes away and I would just okay, I don't know what this day is going to look like, but God, you handle this day. And even staffing, anything that came up. And I just feel like my faith, that plays a big part of what I do too.
Aww. That's really nice. Yeah, because like you said, there's so many things, there's so many things that could happen, and you just don't know what each new day is going to bring. So yeah, you mentioned your husband too, like having family to go back to. Have they been a support for you?
Oh, for sure. I have. I have a husband, I have 4 children, and I've been super blessed. Throughout the pandemic, I've had all 4 kids at periods of time living at our house, which has been wonderful. So one of my daughters is a nurse at the hospital, another is in nursing. So Yeah, so no, for sure. I feel like we all encourage one another. And so, yeah, having family support for sure has been awesome. Yeah.
Having two daughters as young nurses, what have some of those conversations been like in these last 2 years?
Oh, I know. It's, my daughter actually convocated, well, however we convocated that year. But yeah, April of 2020. And so she jumped in right in the thick of things. And, I think I just keep reminding them that this isn't normal nursing. This isn't how I've experienced it over the last number of years. And it is such a rewarding career. You give so much, but you get so much back. And I just honestly try to encourage all these young nurses, like, don't give up. With so many people thinking about different careers or leaving the profession, it's really an amazing profession. And so yeah, it's for sure, I would say starting out has been a struggle, I'm sure, for lots of the young nurses and grads. But I do just want to encourage them, like, it will get better. Yeah.
Has there been any time, Lana, in these last 2 years where you've sort of like taken a step back and thought, like, I could use a break, or I don't know how much I have to give yet? Have those thoughts crossed your mind?
Yeah, I think it's so good to have amazing coworkers, right? And so, there were days that one person might be down or the other person feeling kind of overwhelmed. And just to be able to talk about it was huge, because they're walking this walk through you and at the same time as you, sorry. And I just think that that has been amazing, right? And I feel like during this time, we've just grown closer together, elders, residents, families, staff. And I feel I think one day in particular, I remember clearly as one of my coworkers was in the hall and I was passing, and I said, "Hi, how are you today?" And normally, you get that pat answer like, "Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm good." And she just stopped and she said, "I'm really struggling. I'm really down today. And this just seems to be going on and on and on." And that day, like, I was able to build her up. And another day, if I think, "Oh man, when is this going to be done?" We would just like encourage each other, I feel like, all along the way.
I think you bring up something interesting too, in terms of, like you said, you say hi to someone and you sort of get that regular answer, or the answer that you sort of expect. Oh yeah, no, things are going fine. But the fact that your colleague felt comfortable enough to say to you, like, I'm not doing well. It's not a good day, and that you were there for it. Like, you must have so much trust with your fellow nurses and your fellow care staff, and I would say elders as well. Hey.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, I find it like a privilege to come to work. People, I think, during the pandemic that were told to stay at home, work from home, and I thought, I don't know that I could do that. I actually loved coming to work. I have friends here. Like, I feel like we're like a big family here at Sherbrooke. So, we feed off each other, and there's so much to give, there's so much to receive. And so I really felt like I want to go to work. I want to see my friends.
It's so funny. I felt the same way too, because my wife is a teacher, and so when the pandemic first started, she had to teach from home, and I still got to, go. I got to go to work, and I know work was hard and work was challenging, but I got to see my friends too, and I would have struggled, I think, if I would have had to stay home.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah. I don't know. I think, I'm too social. I don't I would have really struggled if I would have had to be at home this whole time, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Off the top, you mentioned some of the challenges, and I know that for a decent stretch of time, like over 40 days, Veterans Village was going through a COVID outbreak, and whatever you're comfortable talking about, Lana, but like how challenging was that to go through an actual COVID outbreak here in the village for you and everyone here?
Oh, it is. It's draining for sure, right? It's just all the added. A lot of it too, I think, it happened in our memory care area, and that has challenges of itself, right? Where people with dementia and just trying to keep people apart, but people not understanding. And so there's just all the added layers and all the, people were sick, for sure. I think staff in the houses, the N95 masks that, you see, all of those things for sure kind of drag you down. And if it wasn't for some of the other neighborhoods that have been through outbreak, saying, we've been there, and you saw that. You saw them get through it, and, you come out stronger. And so I think that was hopeful. Other long-term care homes, even in Saskatoon, sent like encouraging cards and like snacks and just said, we know what you're going through, and, we're here for you. And just knowing that people were thinking about you and cared was just like amazing. Yeah.
You're so right about, like, I thought of the community within the building here at Sherbrooke, but you're right. Like, it was, because so many, I think every care home's probably been through it, and to have that sense of camaraderie must have felt really good.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's just, even you, Eric. No, I was thinking one time, I think it was actually maybe.
Where's this going?
No, I was thinking one time, I think it was just shortly after our outbreak, and we ended up having a blizzard. And it was just like, and maybe my timelines are a little bit off, but it just felt like, honestly, this is like the icing on the cake, right? Like, we're struggling, we're just getting through this, and now we have this massive blizzard. Evening staff, some can't go home, they're staying into the night. Night staff can't get in, so people are covering, and the evening stay till night, stay till days. And, in the morning, managers, staff, they're, anyone with trucks is picking people up, bringing people to work. And even like all of that, during that time, and it just felt like, oh, wow, like now this, and, and just like the staffing shortage crisis, and now you put this like on top. But then a local coffee shop donated coffee, and you came down the hall with your happy voice, and that was like the best cup of coffee I've had in so long. It was like amazing. And I just remember, like, it felt like so caring, like a warm hug. And it was just like, it's so, you never know, right? The little things that people reach out and do, and how much they mean.
Simple pleasures, like, totally simple pleasures. Shout out to Citizen Cafe in Brittany. That's where I got the coffee from. But you're so right. Like, in like, you must see those simple pleasures and how much they mean to people, especially residents, and especially in a time like this.
Oh, for sure. Lots of times, one thing I love to do in the mornings is, if the staff is like really busy and getting people up and in the houses, and there's people just sitting at the table waiting for their breakfast, and I might not know what they take, but honestly, probably 90 to 95% of them take a cup of coffee, and I can do coffee, cream, and sugar. And so, just to be able to go in and say, do you want a cup of coffee? And nobody turns you down. So, yeah, I love that. I love to be able to offer, like you said, those little simple pleasures, little bits of joy. Yeah.
Why did you want to be a nurse?
Oh, I always wanted to care and help for people. I had 2 aunts, actually, just like amazing, fun-loving, happy, and I just looked at them and their life, and just, how that much they love their careers too, and all that they had to give. And I just thought, you know, if I can make somebody's day a little bit brighter, I want to do that.
Does it? Are you hopeful for what sort of the future looks like for nursing when you think of your two daughters?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Because I honestly think, like, when I look and think these are the toughest 2 years of my career. So for them, anything I feel like going forward, you know, there's a bright future. Things are going to turn around. Things are getting better. And so I just think, you know, there's so much positivity and for sure going forward, there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was a real pleasure speaking with you. You came in on your day off, so I really do appreciate you taking the time. I so admire what you and all your colleagues do. But like I said off the top, it's fun to watch you work because I just think you hold yourself with such a cool and calm presence, and you obviously are so caring. So thanks for doing this.
Aw, it was great. Thanks for asking me.
This is episode 7, season 4 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson, and we are meeting 3 Saskatoon nurses reflecting on what the past 2 years of COVID-19 have been like for them. Listen to YXE Underground on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the website, yxeunderground.com, or wherever you find your podcasts. And don't forget to leave a 5-star review if you like what you hear. The final guest in this episode is someone I've known all my life. Jamie Coates grew up on a farm south of Chaplin, Saskatchewan. He was a great hockey player, an amazing musician, and one heck of an older cousin to me. Jamie is a registered nurse in the surgery unit at City Hospital. He's been in this role for around 20 years and feels a strong sense of camaraderie with his peers in the surgery unit. I'm biased when it comes to Jamie, but I think he's just a natural when it comes to nursing. He's so caring and kind, and he loves making meaningful connections with his patients. The pandemic has been hard at times for Jamie. I really do appreciate how he opens up in our conversation about some of the personal and professional challenges he's faced these past 2 years, and I think his insights on self-care can be applied to any line of work. We met for coffee a few weeks ago.
You know what? I think, like a lot of people, it's been very challenging, both professionally and personally. And it's, I think, not just exclusive to nursing, but within nursing, I feel like we were really stretched, sort of running at capacity before the pandemic, and then everything that has sort of come out of that has really pushed us past the point. So it's been very challenging, and I think it sort of spills over into the everyone's personal life. I think everyone's been struggling with the pandemic, but you see a lot of sort of the best and worst in these environments. So you've seen some just incredible people doing incredible work under very trying times, both in and out of the hospital.
I want to stay in the hospital for a minute because I'm so curious about how, and I'm sure your job has changed in many ways, but how has your job changed, Jamie, during the pandemic?
Do you know, that's a great question. I think it's been really fluid. Like so many facets of healthcare, what we're asked to do daily is changing. The guidelines of what we need to be doing, the patient needs, and just the overall system itself has been very fluid with changes coming day to day, week to week. And that's been a bit of a grind because it's sort of tough to fall back into that natural rhythm that we were working kind of pre-pandemic. So that's been difficult in the hospitals for sure.
Do you do you ever worry that natural rhythm will come back, or do you think it will at some point?
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels a bit like the Twilight Zone. You don't really know where you are or what it's going to look like. To me, like being in the profession a while, you worry about some of the younger grads coming into it in a really strange time, for them not having that sort of sense of normal, and how that is going to change their satisfaction and their growth in the profession.
That's so interesting you mentioned that, because I was speaking with one of my colleagues at Sherbrooke, who Lana, who's on the podcast, and she's been a nurse for 28 years, I think, and she mentioned that too. She said, I hope the younger nurses, because her two daughters are beginning their nursing career, I hope they realize that it's not normally like this. Like it's and it hopefully it won't be like that forever. But that's totally interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah, and it's fantastic to hear of young nurses being in that. I think coming from that family background, that'll give them a leg up. Yeah, and I think that the normal things that you sort of get satisfaction in the job, as busy as it was, are a little bit fewer in between because of the stress of it. And there's so much growth in a person's career, especially in that first 5 years of nursing. You're seeing new things all the time. You're running into new circumstances, dealing with different dynamics. And I think for the kids coming out now, I can't imagine being in their place. I know when I was back in nursing school, they always talked about one of the real concerns within the profession was the amount of people that leave within that 5-year window. And me, looking at it now, like that's a definite concern, not just in nursing, but in all facets within that healthcare industry. I think there's been a lot of moral injury that you hear spoken about. And you definitely want people to experience those joyful interactions in nursing, because when it's at its best, it's there's nothing like it. You're helping people, and it's a wonderful feeling.
Do you consider yourself like a leader or a mentor where you work, Jamie, especially with some of these younger nurses?
Well, that's a good question. I never really think of myself as that, but I guess I suppose I would. In my area, I definitely would be probably one of the senior ones on the unit. And yeah, I definitely try. I'm very cognizant of trying to be a good coworker and be a good support. And yeah, I guess I would say a mentor. There's kind of a push now. We're trying to find placements for some of the nursing students coming out. So I'll be doing some of that, I think, this month. So it will be challenging for both of us probably in all this. But
yeah, how do you approach that relationship, Jamie? Because having known you all my life, like I know how amazing and kind a human being you are. But with the stresses that come with the job and everything, like, is it how do you approach that mentorship role?
Oh, that's very kind of you. I always look at how I was treated as a nurse, and I was so blessed. Just coming up at the time I did, the coworkers that I had the opportunity to learn from. We've had a few of them just retire recently, and just watch. They just created a safe environment, made you feel supported, made you feel like you mattered, and listened to your concerns, and led by example. So I think that's what I aim to do with my younger colleagues, and from the nursing students too. And I think if you're truly honest with yourself, you learn more from them sometimes than you teach, than you're bestowing upon them. It's definitely a interactive relationship. So, and by teaching someone too, it always makes you think about why you're doing this process in the first place. So I think it's helpful. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking, because I always want to make sure that I'm doing a good job and giving them that safe environment and making sure that they're getting more out of something than they're putting in. And these days it's challenging just to to have that reward sometimes when you feel like you're sort of putting everything out, but sometimes it's tough to refill the tank.
You know what, and I hear that from my colleagues all the time, is that before pandemic, you would leave work and the tank was full. You felt good about the work that you were doing, and for the reasons that you've said. And then now the tank isn't as full as when you leave for the day. Was that something, Jamie? Like, have you been aware of that since the start of the pandemic, or did it sort of just hit you one day where it's like, gosh, I'm tired, I'm drained a bit?
Yeah, myself, my personal life, I had some issues with anxiety and depression, just kind of years of maybe not dealing with things cumulatively. And I think sometimes as nurses we do a terrible job looking after ourselves. We're, like I said, we're so used to putting that energy outwards that taking care of ourselves is secondary, or we view it as being a selfish activity. And I'm having to reevaluate looking at that. And through the pandemic, it's sort of amplified that too. So you really have to be conscious of looking after yourself, because you can't care for others if you can't care for yourself. And it sounds so cliche, but that's really one of the things I want to put forth with the younger grads too. Just because I think it is something that gets overlooked. And like I said, it sounds cliche, but it's so important. And I think that extends beyond the healthcare world. I think so much of the time we end up kind of outpouring this energy, but not taking time to reset it.
Was that hard for you, Jamie, to sort of realize that a bit?
Yeah, it was very difficult. I think as a caregiver, you feel guilty putting energy somewhere other than your patient or their families. So that's been I think one of the more difficult things with nursing, and definitely during the pandemic. So, but it's an opportunity to learn and grow. So I'm grateful for that.
Where you work, Jamie, do you have I was gonna say a crew? That's probably not the right word, but do you have a team of nurses that you're able to sort of lean on when times get tougher, when things get really busy?
Yeah, like I say, I'm so blessed. I have the most wonderful, caring staff, friends, the physiotherapists, the nursing staff. We try to, everybody's part of the team. Housekeeping, it's a family, and that is everything. And I think that's partly why we're still functioning as well as we are through that. And then I'm so lucky. I have wonderful family, parents. My wife has been amazing. My aunts and uncles. Just I've been so blessed. And I know with my wife, who's a nurse too, it's been very helpful, because if you have a bad day, you can kind of come home and you're not saying specifics, but they can get a gist of the challenges of the day, and it helps you sort of debrief in a way.
I want to go back a second. You mentioned the word family, like where you work, and when I think of, and I hadn't thought of it this way, but you're right. Like when I think of surgery, I think of someone going and getting their procedure, and maybe it's like a day surgery or something, and then you're sort of out, but it is like. Can you maybe describe a little bit, Jamie, like just what the setting is like where you work, and because I hadn't really thought of it in terms of a family, with everybody working together, but it sounds like it is.
Yeah, very much so. So the surgical unit I work, when we're completely maxed out, I think we'd be, I want to say close to 94 or 96 beds. So we have a lot of the elective orthopedic surgery, gynecology, a lot of the general surgery in regards to breast surgery, some urology. So it's quite a bit of that, as well as a mix of longer stay patients. So people that have been deconditioned, maybe they've fallen and had a fracture, maybe they're waiting for long-term care. So that's definitely a component of it. And our team is, we work very closely with the physiotherapists and occupational therapists. Nursing, we have special care aides. Just a great assortment of different wonderful care providers who I'm proud to say are friends and colleagues, and just the trust I think that we have with each other in regards to that patient care, it makes it that family. And it's funny, as your mom would know, when you spend holidays and night shifts and weekends with people for years on end, 12 hours at a time, there's a special bond. I think it would go beyond a normal, conventional work environment in some ways, but I could be a little bit biased in that, but that's what I've known, and that's the way I definitely feel about it, so very lucky.
Have the bonds become stronger in the last 2 years?
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think myself, speaking of myself, kind of early on in the pandemic, before the vaccines were sort of widely available, I had contracted COVID, was quite ill with it, and the support I received from my coworkers was outstanding, just tremendous, checking in on me, and just so grateful for that. Forever grateful. And nurses have a way of really looking out for one another. So
how do nurses look out for one another?
So you know what? It's a lot of times it's just checking in. We have the nursing humor, which is its own special brand of, which you've probably been privy to in your line of work too. So yeah, it's just probably like everybody else, but that just checking in with each other, and I had care packages, and just wonderful humans. So
my mom and I often talk about like when we're talking about you, Jamie, we talk about like the many qualities that make you such an incredible nurse, and I think one of them is how caring you are to your patients, to your residents that are in your care. Have you been able to be 100% Jamie Coates around them, or has because of COVID and because of all the precautions and stuff, has that changed at all?
Yeah, well, a side note, Eric's mom was a mentor to me and kind of opened my world up to the possibility of a man from rural Saskatchewan getting involved in nursing, and it was just a wonderful mentor to me over the years. I think I have been able to be myself around people, although a caveat with it is this strange time that we're in, where everything is so politicized, and there's so many strong feelings on both sides. I've been a little bit more guarded, and having to check my biases a little bit. I think because I feel strongly about the benefits of vaccination and what science has provided us and to help protect us with this pandemic, and then just realizing there's so many people that are not on the same page, but that still need my care. You just have to be mindful. Like an interesting thing about healthcare is you literally look after so many different types of people, all stripes and employment, prisoners, and all these different kind of human beings, and you learn from each and every one of them, and it's a privilege to look after each and every one of them. But you sort of have to be mindful of being respectful of everyone's personal journey with this pandemic, and it's been difficult on a lot of people. I think the one thing I didn't really anticipate was so much of the anger, I think, coming back on the healthcare workers. In the early days of the pandemic, there was the clanging of the pots and all those wonderful gestures, and then that has kind of given way to a lot of receiving a lot of anger, whether it's about visiting hours or just in general with care or healthcare in general. And that's been a little bit shocking to me. So I've been more guarded personally about that. But as far as being a nurse, I think the thing that gets you through, the one thing that you really want to hold on to is if in that 12 hours you can get that one meaningful interaction where the patient is feeling understood and you're really able to get the connection. That's everything, and that makes it all worthwhile. So just finding those little moments, and it might be a joke passed between, or it might be a smile, or it might be them confiding something in you, and that's what makes it kind of a privilege to be a nurse. Well, it doesn't make it kind of, it is a privilege to be a nurse.
That was a really wonderful answer. Thank you. I was excited to ask you this question because I knew, I'm guessing you have learned a lot about yourself during the pandemic, and I'm wondering what have you learned about you and your role as a nurse throughout these last couple of years?
You know, I think it sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but you realize how resilient you are some days and how fragile you are some days. So, and I think the real key is recognizing what day you're on and being graceful with yourself during that period, because it's, like I said, it seems like a contradiction, but the extremes of the scale are evident both days. So like I say, some days you're grinding through a shift and it's been challenging, and you're like, yeah, that everything went great. I powered through this challenging moment. And the next day you're like, I don't know how many more times I can do that shift, you know. And it seems like it's got amplified on both scales. So that's, I think, what I've learned about it. And I think just in my coworkers, seeing how resilient they are, but also seeing that frailty too. I'm hoping that the public knows that the system might need a little TLC, the caregivers in it, especially the younger grads. I've worked with some fantastic nurses that haven't been in nursing that long and that got redeployed to the ICUs, seen a lot of things that they probably shouldn't have seen, you know, that young in their career, and they've done just outstanding work and were amazing caregivers through it all. So, but yeah, the resiliency and the walking the line with the fragility as well too. So,
and that must be such a tricky line to walk and to navigate.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the art in it. And I do believe all these things that we're feeling as care providers, people are seeing in other walks of life too. So we're in a really interesting time, and that's where I think that recharging and taking those little moments to sort of center yourself are so important.
I have to ask too, because I know your mom and dad will hopefully listen to this. Do they ever call you or do they worry about you, or do they know you're okay, or how does that work?
Yeah, you know, they have been wonderful. Just kind of being an ear to listen to, but I think they also understand there's probably times that we're not ready to go into talking about it, or there's times that you want to talk about something else happy that's happening just to distract you. So they're salt of the earth people. I'm like I say, I'm so blessed. So
I sure appreciate you talking to me for the podcast, because I when I was thinking, when this idea came to me about interviewing different nurses, to be honest, Jamie, you were the first person I thought of, because I think the world of you, and I think the world of what you do, and I've always thought the world of you dating back to when we were kids, and we would jam in your. Do you want to tell the story where we would jam at your farm?
we would, yeah, we would. A lot of rock and roll was involved. Eric and I, our hearing is probably severely damaged, but Eric, this platform that you've created, this space, is so important. It's so important to tell the stories of the community, the underserved, the challenges we have, creating a safe space for us all to learn from each other, right? And that's what it's about. So you have an incredible gift for that. So going back to our grandmother, she would be so proud of you. So our very special grandma, who is
I know Grandma would be very proud of you as well. I know she would have lots of things to say about the times that we're living in. She really would. Yeah, but Jamie, thank you for your time, and I hope things go well. In the months and years to come, and with your new students that are going to be coming, I don't think they could learn from a better person. So thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric. Thanks.
You have been listening to episode 7, season 4 of YXE Underground. My name is Eric Anderson. I host, produce, and edit this local independent podcast. My thanks to Jamie Coates, Lana Meyerly, and Jenna Isley for being on the podcast and for being such wonderful guests. You can see pictures from this episode by searching YXE Underground on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. A big thank you to my friend Rana Andres for taking such wonderful photos. I also want to thank Saskatoon's Danger Dynamite for taking care of the YXE Underground website, and to my cousin Andrew Dixon for creating the theme music for the podcast. This episode was supported by Rob Romvey and his team at Romvey Wealth Management Group of RBC Dominion Securities in North Battleford. If you need someone to care for your money, to invest your money, to tell you that everything's going to be okay, there's no better group of people than Rob Romvey and his team. Rob has been caring for my money for many, many years, and he's just the best. Rob, thank you so much for your continued support of the podcast. You're one of the best human beings I've ever met, and just so appreciative of your support. I also want to give a quick thank you to all of you who purchased a YXE Underground sweater these last few weeks. We sold out of 30 sweaters in a matter of days, and it's been pretty humbling to see the community support like this. So thank you so much for supporting the podcast. It really does mean a lot. Before I go, I would like to acknowledge that these interviews were gathered on Treaty 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis. YXE Underground is a production of the Salthammer Production Company. My name is Eric Anderson. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon, Saskatoon.